Always fun for us to get a chance to talk to you and hopefully entertain you, Guerin, Emig of the Tulsa World, alongside my friend and OSU beat writer Eli Lederman. As we dive into the Cowboys, thank you very much for diving in with us. You can catch us every week on TulsaWorld.com if you'd like to watch the video version of this, audio only, podcast style. Thanks to our friends at Apple, Google, and Spotify. Eli, first of all, thank you for providing first-class entertainment and a trip down memory lane. I used to collect baseball cards, right? When I was a kid, that would be my reward for getting a weekly allergy shot. I don't know that for those listening, you're going to have to just imagine. I'm holding up a Peter Schmeichel Pro Set soccer card that came delivered from a secret admirer in Stillwater this week, along with Daryl Doran. This guy looks like a referee who's sustained a head wound.
Yeah, he looks nothing like a soccer player and a soccer player who's under the age of 30. A lot of these guys, I don't know, they looked older back then.
the game was played at an older, slower pace back then. That's Steve Foster for the record. Mick Quinn and Daryl Doran also graced my mailbox this week. So thank you, Eli, for the treat.
Well, you never know what you go to. This is a lesson for everybody. You go into a thrift store or an antique store, you never know what you will find. And that is among those things, as I explained to you off camera, is about 200 old soccer cards, like baseball cards, with soccer cards for 99 cents. And come on, who can't beat a deal like that? That's hours of entertainment. Look at the smile on your face.
This was a Stillwater store?
Yeah, right on 9th Street. Antique, they're not a sponsor. Maybe we can work on that.
I was gonna say.
And so we're giving them some free plugs now. Maybe they're gonna have to get us back later. But the Antique Lobby on 9th is a good place. You can get lost in there for hours. They got everything.
When we take the show on the road, that'll be our first stop. So
they have cats.
I don't know if we have OSU soccer to transition into from that just that glittering segment as an opener. Eli, I do know that we need to talk one last thorough time about Cowboy basketball now that OSU season has officially ended. And the only place we can see Mike Boynton is on Big 12 coverage. The ESPN is apparently using Coach Boynton as a I don't want to say studio analyst because he's at T-Mobile Arena in Kansas City, but providing some between games commentary that I've actually kind of enjoyed. I think he looks good. I think TV agrees with him for the record.
I do too. He looked really good at that desk last night in Kansas City, and I think I think it does suit him. If I don't know if TV's in his future, if there's desire for it, but whenever he hangs it up, I think he's got a future there. I was wondering last night. I mean, after that big OU win over Baylor, it had to be a little bit painful for him to be sitting there talking about OU getting an upset win. But he does look quite good up there. And we chatted about this a little bit. I mean, were you surprised at all that the Big 12 brought him out there? I mean, it seems like a slam dunk in terms of getting Mike Boynton in front of a camera, but the idea of the Big 12 bringing in a coach with where the storyline is about OSU, why is he sitting at a desk and not there coaching with his team? And that to me was a bit of not a surprise, but I thought about that. But I think for Mike Boynton in the program, it's a no-brainer to have him out there.
I don't know. I haven't watched wall-to-wall coverage, but I think I've seen more clips, more of his segments than I haven't, and I don't believe that the postseason situation has been addressed. And I keep wondering if they'll bring that up at some point because they have 25 to 30 minutes to fill
right
between games. That's when you see the most of Boynton. As far as I can tell, it's been straight analysis, but you got to think at some point maybe, or maybe it's part of the agreement. Look,
yeah,
maybe from Mike's end, I'll come on. I really don't want to belabor the point, right? Maybe that's it. But to me, I think from the Big 12 standpoint, it's a reminder of someone's been wrong. One of our programs has been wronged, and this is sort of a reminder of that. I think it makes Boynton look good that it's not like he's not balled up in a corner of his office, right? So
that's for sure. And this takes us to Monday, where Mike Boynton, or Tuesday, days blend at this point, where he had his end of season wrap up press conference, and one of the things he lamented on top of, I mean, he's not, nobody here is over the sanctions and the penalties and the postseason ban. I don't think anybody in that program feels any less wronged 4 months later. And Mike Boynton's still frustrated, particularly for Isaac Likely and Bryce Williams, the two seniors who won't get another shot. But, he noted that every school in the country, even the schools that go to their conference tournament and get bounced day one, this time of year, everybody's front and center. And that one of the only schools that is not front and center while college basketball is at the top of the sports landscape is Oklahoma State. So there is an element there of just keeping the relevance and putting that face in a very public forum. So I think on that front, it makes sense. It's important. And it was an interesting, candid, per usual, with Mike Boynton, kind of end of season press conference. Those emotions were still there, but you could tell, and no surprise, having 21-22 in the rear view and being able to look forward to next year it just looked like he had a weight off his shoulders. And, I certainly think the program is ready to move forward and just get past this. And here they are now with that opportunity.
Yeah, you went to the exit interview during the week. The last time I caught Boynton and the Cowboys was after their last game, which was now last Saturday against Texas Tech, a game that they won. A game that sort of typified their season. They played really inconsistent basketball, didn't play real pretty, but did fight, did stay together. We've talked before over the course of the season about that being an obvious plus to this year, is the ability to even if you detected every now and then some tension, some difficulty, you always saw players up off the bench, supporting teammates, right? Engaged in games, even if they weren't getting a lot of playing time. That was certainly the case as the Cowboys went out with the 1-point win over Texas Tech. So that was nice to see. It was nice to see the players have some final success, since they were the ones ultimately victimized by this whole mess. But then, Boynton comes into the room afterwards, and as usual, he really gets you interested because he says he's very open, very candid. And among the things he says, Eli, is that I've got players that have been recruited over the course of the season. Maybe he's referenced that with you guys in the beat along the way. It's the first time I'd heard him say something like that. And again, it just leads you to wonder how behind the scenes, just how strenuous the last 5 months have been for that program.
I don't think it can be overstated enough just how difficult it was to get this team to that point, to 15-15, which Mike Boynton said that number itself is not a success. But if you look at this season, finishing tied for 5th in the Big 12, knocking off a number 1 team in Baylor, getting some big wins, he saw a lot of success in this group despite the struggles. But I really do think just getting that group to March 5 and beating Texas Tech on the final day was a mission. And we saw all the ups and downs. And on the front of, talking about his players, some of his own guys being recruited before the season's even out, I've probably heard that from him 3 times in the last week. So it wasn't over the course of the season, but he's really been driving that point home. Donovan Williams was in the portal less than 48 hours after that game ended on Saturday. And he was a guy, I think, and Mike Boynton said, disappointed it didn't work out here, but he's a great kid. And it was probably he was the one guy you could probably look at on that roster and say mutually just better if they for both sides. But, he may not be, likely won't be the only outgoing. And that was another thing that Mike Boynton spoke about as he looks toward next year. It's the portal era. He can't guarantee that, he said, I don't expect 12 new faces on the roster next year. I don't expect to lose everybody. But if I have to, we'll recruit 12 really good new faces. So I think he's now, maybe with the benefit of not having to worry about March, already looking toward next year and rebuilding this team, because for all the NCAA stuff and whatever hung over them, this was also just at times a very flawed basketball team.
Right.
They had a lot of talent, but never quite maximized it. And there's certainly work to be done. I mean, he referenced, I was the one who asked him, I said, what do you guys need for next year that you didn't have? And I mean, he smiled. It's no secret. He was like, we need better shooting, proven shooting, and a point guard. And those aren't exactly, easy things to find. Everybody's looking for good shooting. Most every program could use a point guard. So he's got his work cut out for him, but those were the goals. And I think he acknowledged that there's guys who could come and go.
I was going to ask about the 3 Tulsa kids in particular, just sort of a final statement that you might have to offer on Bryce Thompson. as well as Keylan and Caleb Boone. How do we look at what they did this past season, and how do we look toward what they might have to offer next?
Yeah, well, with Bryce Thompson, I think, there were obviously sky high expectations when they left. Booker T went to Kansas, and lots of expectations coming back. But if you were realistic about year one of him settling into a new program, not a program that was just going to put the ball in his hands and say shoot 25 times a game, I think it was a qualified success. He showed that he can be a legitimate, proven scorer in the Big 12, which I think he'd shown flashes of, but only played so much at Kansas. And with him, it's assuming, and I'm pretty confident on this, that he's sticking around, that he's a guy that next year and the year after can be a really productive and valuable player for Oklahoma State, and maybe live up to some of that hype he's had hanging with him. Boone brothers both had interesting seasons that sort of mirrored each other. And it seems like it's mirrored a lot of their time here at Oklahoma State, where if one was up, the other was maybe down a bit. And started with Caleb Boone. He was injured in preseason and then just struggled in non-conference play to at times even get off the bench. And while he did that, Keylan was one of the most important bench players they had. Take you to the final 2 weeks of the season. Mm-hmm. And Caleb was playing, but Keylan was the one who couldn't get off the bench. He'd been usurped by Woody Newton. And I'd say those are two guys when I'm, not based on anything necessarily, that you'd wonder about. They're 3 years in here. Neither of them had a junior season I'm sure they would have liked to have had. And
right.
As you look at a roster of guys, I think there's only a handful that you'd be pretty certain are coming back. And that's down, you can include Musa Cisse and Avery Anderson who have decisions to make about pro basketball. They would fall into that group of let's wait and see, because I don't. I'm sure they'd have options elsewhere, but I also know that Mike Boynton certainly sees their value here. But I think that may truly end up being the defining part of this offseason for the Cowboys is the portal, who comes and then, or excuse me, who goes. And as a result of that, who can come. They're still recruiting the class of 22. There's 2 point guards, Sky Clark and Anthony Black, that Oklahoma State are in on. You bring in a 5-star point guard, that might solve your problem, even if they're young. But shooting and a point guard seem to be top of the checklist.
If there's a transition ahead for the men's program, that's to say the least, for what's coming for the Oklahoma State women's basketball team. Now that Jim Littell is moving on, as we tape, the Cowgirls still have to play a quarterfinal game. You said Baylor is the opponent?
Top seeded Baylor today.
Baylor? Yeah, probably not going to turn out well for OSU. So that would put a bow on the Littell era. I feel guilty asking a guy who hasn't been on the beat a year for reflections on him, but you have followed the story. You've gotten to know Jim, I think, a little bit. That women's basketball has enjoyed if not a consistently successful place in the OSU athletic hierarchy. It's been important, especially as Oklahoma has faded, I think, the last 4 years. Now that OU is back sort of on track under Jenny Baranczyk, their new coach, I think the importance magnifies for OSU to sort of keep pace, for lack of a better term.
I think that's exactly right. That may be part of what played into the timing here of making this decision this season. On Monday, before the Cowgirls headed to Kansas City for the Big 12 tournament, the program announced that it was that they'd mutually agreed, them and Jim Littell, that this was going to be it after 11 seasons. And it comes after really his probably the worst season that they've had under him, their most losses, their worst conference record. And I do wonder if Chad Weiberg and Casey Schrum were looking down at Norman and thinking we're going to get left behind. And that's in a sport, women's basketball, that I think is only growing in popularity nationally, in a really strong conference. So it to them was the right time to take things in a new direction. We'll see what they do with the search, but I think for now it's about focusing on Jim Littell. This has been the face of the program for 11 years, and it started in a big way with him.
Right.
He came into that job, as a lot of people know, in November 2021, after Kurt Budke, who he'd served with for 6-7 years as the associate head coach, was killed in a plane crash. And I asked John Smith yesterday, the wrestling coach, asked him about Jim Littell. And that was the first thing he went to. And Chad Weiberg, similarly on Monday, that Jim Littell carried not just the program, but as they would put it, the OSU family through an incredible tragedy. having nothing to do with what happened on the court that year in 2011, which was a 22-11 season and a women's NIT championship that I know meant a lot. But he was the rock there that got the program through that and guided them after that to 4 straight NCAA tournament appearances. And after that run, things have been more up and down. Last year was his best year in the Big 12. They made the tournament, but this year the downturn, and now here they are where he's, every day could be the last day. They won last night and beat Texas Tech. And as Jim Littell quipped post game, they've beaten Tech now 3 times this year. And so he was asked about Baylor, and he said, I'm going to tell my players we're playing Tech again and see if they fall for it. Which was a good – that got some real genuine laughs from the radio crew, and I had Bubs laughing here at home. So they've got Baylor today, and that's a tall test. And this could be it for Jim Littell. But if so, I think it meant a lot to him hearing him speak that they went in fighting last night, and we'll see what they can do with Baylor today. But Oklahoma State women's basketball is headed in some new direction that we know.
You referenced John Smith. I'd be curious to know how he is coming off a strange Big 12 championships where you got the feeling the Cowboys were just pressing to get as many of their guys through, right? Into finals contention, championship contention, where they finished 4th in the final standings, team stand 3rd or 4th.
Yeah. Yep.
Missouri won. I know that. And for that to not say Oklahoma State at the top of the standings is bizarre. So how'd you find John coming out of that weekend?
I met him with a hearty MIZ. No, I didn't.
Yeah, I bet you did.
No, he was actually in a fun, animated mood yesterday when we spoke to him. But coming off of that, I mean, this is an unfamiliar position for Oklahoma State. It was unfamiliar that they went to Tulsa last weekend as not your prohibitive favorites to go win it. They've done it for the previous 9 years, and they looked all right after day one, but I think what a lot of people expected is what unfolded Sunday, where there were other teams there and other teams in this conference who've caught up a bit. And so now they head to NCAAs with some true, national championship potential individually. Dayton Fix, chief among those guys. But as a team, they're not, John Smith said it himself. He cut someone off. Someone was trying to get it out, well, you guys aren't exactly. And he's like, we're not contenders. That's what you're trying to say, right? And he acknowledge that, but measured that with what he wants to see from the individuals and still from this team. They can go push there, because I think there's individually Carter Young, for instance, is your 18-year-old freshman who may be wrestling, and John Smith interestingly kind of hung on the fact that this year with certain athletes across the country getting those extra years, Carter Young, 18-year-old freshman who, he's brilliant, but he looks maybe even younger than 18. He could be wrestling 25-year-olds out there in Detroit next week. And so he kind of hung on some of those differences, but he wants to see what someone like Carter Young can do.
Yeah.
And he has guys like Caden Gefeller and Dayton Fix who are, these are the opportunities for them that they've been working on since they got here to go to NCAAs and go do the thing. So while the Cowboys are maybe not in the position they've been in and are coming off an unfamiliar Big 12 where they don't come away with silverware as a team.
Yeah.
I think there's still some hope as far as what they can do in Detroit, but definitely a different feel around that program than most marches.
Tell you what, let's revisit the wrestling team next week, see how that goes. Let's circle back to basketball, check in on the roster situation for Mike Boynton. We'll see if we have any kind of an update to share regarding the women's basketball coach search as Jim Littell moves on. And I think we can talk football again next week. Is that right? Is that safe to say?
We'll be counting starting Tuesday. We can do the 1 week countdown, 7 days, 6 days, 5 days to spring practice, which is equal parts hard to believe because it doesn't feel like all that long ago we were kicking at the Camelback at Fiesta Bowl. But especially while you see there's programs who are basically done with their spring camps, the ones who started in late February, and both OU and OSU have not gotten going. So it'll be exciting to be around football again.
Yeah, they also have pro day to stage still in Stillwater, whereas Oklahoma and Tulsa, for instance, like a bunch of other programs, did theirs this past week coming off the combine. All right, stay warm out there, sir, and say hi to your friends at the. Apologize to what was it? Got Macklemore's? I think I did thrift shop.
Whew.
Is that right?
No, it is. No,
do we need to? Yeah,
good for me. No, good for you.
Should have brought my turntable in here. I could have done a sample as I held up my Schmeichel card in honor of your sojourn.
Be proud of that one, that you got that reference.
Man, more proud I got this guy right here. Look at this dude.
I'm glad
that's Casper's dad, right?
Casper's dad, yeah. And it is pretty, I mean, we're now diving into the weeds, but if you read the back of that card, it says he brought in as like the missing jewel for Alex Ferguson to win his first title. Alex Ferguson goes on to win 13 Premier League titles. It's funny that was ever a thought.
I have a thought to do a soccer podcast with you now. There's some guys in the OSU athletic department who I think would love to help launch a European soccer pod. So I don't know if anyone will listen, but that doesn't matter as long as we're entertaining ourselves, right? It's kind of like our approach to this show.
Exactly. I'm entertained.
Which is all that matters. We'll try to have as much fun next week, folks. Thanks very much for watching on TulsaWorld.com and listening via Apple, Spotify, and Google. We do appreciate it sincerely, and we do wish you a pleasant next 7 days.